beginning our unit on legal and ethical aspects of nursing, which is one of the most important foundations of safe and professional nursing practice. As LPNs, you are responsible for understanding not just how to provide care, but also the legal boundaries and ethical expectations that guide every decision you make. Laws and ethics protect patients, protect you as the nurse, and ensure that healthcare is delivered in a safe and accountable manner. In this section, we will explore concepts such as nurse practice acts, scope of practice, patient rights, and major ethical principles like autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, justice, and fidelity. We will also talk about real-life situations you may encounter, such as informed consent, confidentiality, end-of-life choices, and mandatory reporting. By the end of this chapter, you should feel more confident about the legal responsibilities of your role and how to approach ethically challenging situations with professionalism. Remember, ethical nursing practice is not just about following rules. It's about doing what is right for the patient while staying within your scope, maintaining safety, and practicing with integrity. When we talk about the legal aspects of nursing, it's important to understand where laws actually come from. In the United States, laws are rules of conduct established by our government, and nurses must follow these laws to practice safely and legally. There are three major sources of law. First, we have constitutional law, which includes documents like the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights. These documents outline our fundamental freedoms, such as privacy, due process, and equal protection, and they create the framework for how legislative bodies like Congress and state legislatures are formed. The second source is statutory law, which comes from laws made by elected officials at the federal, state, or local level. An example that affects nurses directly is each state's Nurse Practice Act, which defines your scope of practice and sets expectations for licensure, continuing education, and disciplinary action. The third source is administrative or regulatory law, which is created by agencies that elected officials establish, such as state boards of nursing. These agencies write detailed rules and regulations that interpret and enforce statutory laws. For example, the Ohio Board of Nursing creates rules that further explain the Nurse Practice Act and guide clinical expectations for LPNs. Finally, we also have judicial law, which develops through the court system. When someone challenges a law or a legal decision, a judge may affirm, modify, or overturn it, and that decision becomes part of case law. Judicial decisions are very important in healthcare because they help clarify issues like negligence, malpractice, and patient rights. Understanding each of these sources helps you recognize why laws exist, who creates them, and how they impact your nursing practice every day. Now let's look at the difference between civil law and criminal law, because nurses can encounter both in practice. Civil law focuses on protecting the individual rights of people. When someone believes that their rights have been violated, they can bring a civil lawsuit against the person or organization responsible. In nursing, violations of civil law are often called torts, which simply means a wrongful act that causes harm to another person. Examples include negligence, malpractice, invasion of privacy, or defamation. Most nursing-related legal cases fall under civil law because they involve harm or injury to a patient rather than a crime against society. On the other hand, criminal law deals with behaviors that are considered harmful to the public or a threat to society. A crime is viewed as a wrong against society as a whole, even if the act harmed only one person. Criminal offenses can result in fines, imprisonment, or both, depending on the severity of the crime. In nursing, criminal charges are rare but can occur in situations involving intentional harm, abuse, drug diversion, falsifying medical records, or practicing without a license. It's important to understand that a nurse could face both civil and criminal consequences depending on the nature of the act. This is why practicing safely, ethically, and within your scope is essential to protecting both your patients and your professional license. The Nurse Practice Act, or NPA, is one of the most important legal documents that governs your role as an LPN. Every state has its own NPA, and it clearly defines the scope of nursing practice, meaning what nurses are legally allowed to do and what actions are outside their authority. The NPA protects the public by making sure nurses only perform duties that match their training, competence, and licensure. Each state's Board of Nursing is responsible for regulating the nursing profession, and they use the Nurse Practice Act as the foundation for issuing licenses, setting standards of practice, and enforcing disciplinary actions when necessary. This is why it's critical for every nurse to know the expectations in their state. Even if you move to another state, the rules may not be the same, so reviewing that state's NPA is essential. The NPA also provides definitions of the different nursing roles, including what is expected of an RN and what is expected of an LPN or LVN, and in many states it outlines responsibilities for advanced practice nurses like nurse practitioners. For LPNs, the NPA typically emphasizes providing basic nursing care under the direction of an RN or provider, contributing to patient assessments and performing skills identified within the LPN scope. This slide is important because everything you do in practice, every medication, every procedure, every patient interaction, must fall within what your state legally allows. Practicing outside your scope can lead to disciplinary action or even legal consequences. When we talk about becoming a nurse, the word licensure is key. Licensure is a legal process that grants permission for an individual to practice nursing, and your state's Board of Nursing is the agency that determines whether you meet the eligibility requirements. These requirements typically include completing an approved nursing program, submitting an application, undergoing a background check, and passing the required licensure examination. Each state participates in the National Council of State Boards of Nursing, or NCSBN. This organization develops the NCLEX-PNR, which is the national licensure examination that every practical nursing graduate must pass. A passing score on the NCLEX PNNCR is recognized in all U.S. states as one of the essential qualifications for licensure, which ensures consistency in nursing competency across the country. Another important topic in licensure is reciprocity and nurse licensure compacts. Reciprocity refers to one state recognizing the nursing license of another state, but this concept has largely evolved into what we now call the Nurse Licensure Compact, NLC. Under the NLC, nurses who hold a multi-state license can practice in any member state without needing to obtain additional licenses. However, not all states participate, so your ability to use a multi-state license depends on your primary state of residence. As the healthcare system becomes more mobile, especially with telehealth and travel nursing, licensure portability continues to be a major topic in nursing regulation. It's important for all nursing students to understand that, even though you are still learning, you are held to the same standards of care as a licensed nurse whenever you are working with patients. This means the expectations for safety, professionalism, communication, and ethical behavior apply to you just as much as they apply to an LPN or RN. Legally, student nurses are responsible for their own actions or inaction, and courts expect students to behave as a prudent nurse in training would in a similar situation. Because of this responsibility, one of the most important safety behaviors you can practice is consulting your instructor whenever you are unsure about a skill, a medication, a patient change, or any situation that feels outside your comfort level. You should never guess or proceed without clarity, especially when a patient's condition is changing rapidly. Asking for help is a sign of safe practice, not weakness. Student nurses also need to understand the basics of their state's Nurse Practice Act, because even as a student, you cannot perform tasks that fall outside the LPN scope or your program's policies. Knowing the legal limits and expectations of your role helps protect your patients, your license in progress, and your future career. Everything you do now is building the foundation for safe, competent nursing practice. Professional accountability is one of the core expectations for every nurse, including students preparing to enter the field. At its foundation, accountability means that the nurse accepts full responsibility for meeting the healthcare needs of patients in a safe, competent, and caring manner. This involves more than simply completing tasks. It means ensuring that everything you do is guided by evidence-based practice, ethical decision-making, and a genuine commitment to patient well-being. For students, accountability includes applying classroom learning and nursing theory in the clinical setting. Clinical practice is where you transform knowledge into action, using the skills you've learned to assess patients, communicate effectively, and participate in their care. It also means recognizing when you need guidance, speaking up about concerns, and consistently practicing within your level of preparation and your scope as a student nurse. Finally, true professional accountability requires a lifelong commitment to staying current, competent, and knowledgeable. Healthcare changes constantly. New medications, new technologies, new safety standards. Nurses must continuously update their education, seek clarification when needed, and reflect on their performance. Maintaining competence is not optional. It is a professional duty that directly impacts patient safety and trust. When nurses embrace accountability, they strengthen their practice and contribute to better outcomes for every patient they serve. Delegation is a vital part of nursing practice, especially for LPNs working in environments where teamwork is essential. Delegation means assigning specific duties or tasks to another person while still maintaining responsibility for the outcomes of those tasks. Even though you are sharing the workload, you are not transferring accountability, you are simply directing another qualified individual to carry out a portion of care. As an LPN, you may supervise nursing assistants, patient care technicians, or other LPNs, depending on your state's Nurse Practice Act and your facility's policies. Effective delegation requires you to understand what each team member is legally permitted and competent to do. You must never delegate a task that is outside the person's scope or ability, especially if the task requires nursing judgment or clinical decision-making. When you delegate, your role does not end with giving instructions. The delegating nurse remains responsible for supervising and evaluating the care provided by the licensed or unlicensed person. This includes monitoring the patient's response, ensuring the delegated task was completed correctly, and stepping in if the situation changes or becomes unsafe. The goal of delegation is not just efficiency, it is ensuring safe, high-quality, patient-centered care delivered through effective teamwork. Strong delegation skills help prevent errors, reduce burnout, and support better outcomes for your patients. Standards of care are the foundation for evaluating the quality and safety of nursing practice. These standards outline what a reasonably prudent nurse would do in a similar situation, and they serve as a benchmark for the quality and effectiveness of patient care. Professional organizations, state boards of nursing, healthcare facilities, and evidence-based guidelines all contribute to defining these standards. They help ensure that patients receive consistent, safe, and competent care regardless of where they are treated or who is caring for them. Standards of care become especially important in legal cases. When an incident or patient injury occurs, investigators and attorneys use these standards to determine whether the nurse acted correctly. The central question becomes, did the nurse provide care that meets the expected professional standard? If so, the nurse is legally protected. If not, the nurse may be found negligent. Standards of care, therefore, protect both the patient and the nurse by providing clear expectations for safe practice. For LPNs, understanding standards of care means knowing your scope of practice, following facility policies, using current evidence-based guidelines, and practicing with competence and professionalism. When you follow established standards, you support patient safety and reduce the risk of errors or legal issues. Professional discipline is an essential part of ensuring public safety and maintaining trust in the nursing profession. State boards of nursing are the regulatory agencies responsible for overseeing professional conduct. Their duty is to investigate complaints, determine whether a violation has occurred, and take appropriate disciplinary action when needed. These actions can range from education and remediation to suspension or revocation of a nurse's license, depending on the severity of the situation. The most common charges brought against nurses involve behaviors or actions that compromise patient safety. These include substance abuse, which can impair judgment or performance, incompetence, which refers to lack of knowledge or skill to perform safely, and negligence, which occurs when a nurse fails to act in a reasonable and prudent manner and a patient is harmed as a result. These issues are taken seriously because they directly affect the quality of care patients receive. Another important aspect of professional responsibility is reporting. It is considered negligence not to report another professional's misconduct, especially when patient safety is at risk. This is sometimes called a duty to report. As nurses, we are ethically and legally obligated to speak up if we become aware of unsafe practice, diversion of medications, impairment, abuse, falsified documentation, or any other behavior that jeopardizes patient care. Reporting protects patients, supports the integrity of the profession, and ensures that unsafe practice is addressed before further harm occurs. Continuing education is not just a professional expectation. It is a legal requirement in many states. After passing the NCLEX and receiving a nursing license, most states require nurses to provide evidence of continuing education in order to renew that license. These requirements vary by state. Some require a specific number of contact hours every renewal cycle, while others may require courses on particular topics such as patient safety, law and rules, opioid prescribing awareness, or human trafficking. It's important for every nurse to be aware of the renewal requirements in the state where they practice. Beyond legal requirements, continuing education is essential because healthcare changes rapidly. Nurses must stay updated on current clinical practice, pharmacology, advances in medical technology, and new evidence-based guidelines. Continuing education helps ensure that your skills and knowledge remain current so that you can practice safely. It also helps prevent outdated practices, reduces medication errors, and supports better decision-making at the bedside. Ultimately, continuing education reflects a commitment to lifelong learning. As nurses, we owe it to our patients and to ourselves to keep growing professionally. Staying informed keeps patients safer, improves outcomes, and strengthens your confidence and competence in an ever-changing healthcare system. This slide highlights some of the major laws and guidelines that shape nursing practice, protect patients, and ensure safe working environments. As nurses, we must be familiar with these regulations because they directly affect the care we provide and the expectations placed on us. The Occupational Safety and Health Act, OSHA, helps ensure that healthcare workers have a safe workplace by enforcing standards related to infection control, needle stick safety, chemical exposure, and injury prevention. The Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act requires healthcare professionals, including nurses, to report suspected child abuse or neglect. Failure to report can result in legal consequences and puts children at risk. Nurses must also understand laws related to discrimination and sexual harassment, which prohibit unfair treatment and protect employees from hostile work environments. These protections apply to both patients and staff and help maintain safety, respect, and professionalism in healthcare settings. Good Samaritan laws protect healthcare professionals who provide emergency care outside the workplace, such as at the scene of an accident, by limiting liability as long as they act in good faith and within their training. Patients' rights outline what individuals are entitled to during care, such as informed consent, privacy, respectful treatment, and participation in decision-making. The National Patient Safety Goals, developed by the Joint Commission, promote best practices that prevent common causes of harm, including medication errors, infections, falls, and communication breakdowns. HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, protects patient privacy and controls how health information is shared. Violations can lead to serious penalties for both individuals and facilities. Finally, nurses must understand consents and releases, which ensure that patients are informed, voluntary participants in their care. Proper consent is both an ethical obligation and a legal requirement. Together, these laws and guidelines create a structure that guides safe, ethical, and patient-centered nursing practice. OSHA plays a major role in protecting the safety of healthcare workers, including nurses. OSHA creates and enforces regulations on handling infectious and toxic materials, radiation, chemicals, electrical equipment, and any other workplace hazard. These rules are designed to prevent injuries and occupational illnesses, especially in high-risk environments like hospitals, long-term care facilities, and clinics. All healthcare workers must receive orientation and ongoing education in OSHA-regulated topics. This includes training in blood-borne pathogens, safe handling of sharps, preventing occupational exposure, fire safety, emergency response to bomb threats, safe lifting techniques to prevent injury, and proper evacuation procedures. These trainings must be repeated regularly to keep staff current and competent. OSHA also requires every facility to maintain an up-to-date record of all hazardous substances, along with easily accessible material safety data sheets, also called safety data sheets, under newer standards. These sheets describe each chemical's risks, safe handling procedures, and instructions for what to do in case of exposure or spills. Nurses should always know where these sheets are kept, because they support safe practice and quick response in emergencies. OSHA ensures that healthcare environments remain as safe as possible for both workers and patients. The Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, or CAPTA, is the federal law that establishes how the United States defines child abuse and neglect and outlines how states must respond. CAPTA provides a standardized definition so that all states identify abuse in a consistent way. It defines abuse as any recent act or failure to act by a parent or caregiver that results in death, serious physical or emotional harm, sexual abuse or exploitation, or any act or failure to act that places the child at imminent risk of serious harm. This definition is intentionally broad to ensure protection for children in a wide variety of dangerous situations. For nurses, one of the most important parts of CAPTA is the requirement that licensed healthcare personnel report suspected child abuse. This is known as mandatory reporting. You do not need proof and you do not need to investigate. Your responsibility is simply to report reasonable suspicion. It is better to report and be wrong than to stay silent and leave a child at risk. Mandatory reporting is both a legal and ethical duty. Failure to report can lead to legal consequences for the nurse and, more importantly, can result in continued harm to the child. As an LPN, if you observe unexplained injuries, inconsistent stories, extreme behavioral changes, or signs of neglect such as poor nutrition or hygiene, you must report your concerns immediately to the appropriate authority or following facility policy. CAPTA ensures that children have advocates within the healthcare system who are trained to recognize when something is wrong. Discrimination occurs when a person is treated unfairly or denied opportunities based on characteristics such as race, religion, sex, age, disability, national origin, or other protected categories, rather than on their individual abilities or qualifications. In healthcare, discrimination can happen in employment, patient care, or interpersonal interactions, and it violates both federal law and professional nursing ethics. Nurses have a responsibility to promote fairness and equity in every setting and to ensure decisions are based on patient needs and clinical judgment, not stereotypes or personal biases. In the workplace, discrimination is prohibited under laws such as the Civil Rights Act, Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, and Age Discrimination in Employment Act, ADA. Because of these laws, it is illegal for employers to ask questions on employment applications that reveal protected characteristics. For example, an employer cannot ask about race, ethnicity, marital status, disability, pregnancy, religion, or health conditions. These types of questions can influence hiring decisions unfairly and are strictly prohibited. Understanding discrimination is important for nurses not only as employees but also as patient advocates. Nurses must ensure that all patients receive equitable, respectful, and culturally sensitive care. If a nurse witnesses discrimination against a coworker, a patient, or anyone in the healthcare environment, they have an ethical responsibility to report it and help maintain a safe, inclusive workplace. Sexual harassment is a serious issue in the workplace, including healthcare settings. It involves unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, or any verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature. The key word here is unwelcome. Even if someone claims they were joking or did not intend harm, it is considered sexual harassment if the behavior is unwanted or makes another person uncomfortable. This includes inappropriate comments, touching, gestures, messages, or persistent behavior that creates a hostile environment. Sexual harassment becomes illegal when it is used as a condition of employment, such as implying that someone must tolerate harassment to keep their job or receive a promotion. This is known as quid pro quo, meaning this for that. It is also illegal when the behavior interferes with job performance or creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. Nurses work in close, high-stress environments, and boundaries must always be respected to maintain professionalism and safety. Nurses have the right to a workplace free from harassment, and they also have a responsibility to report sexual harassment when they witness or experience it. Facilities must have clear policies outlining how to report concerns, and retaliation for reporting is prohibited by law. Understanding sexual harassment is essential not only for protecting yourself, but also for advocating for coworkers and maintaining a respectful, safe work culture. Good Samaritan laws are designed to encourage people, including healthcare professionals, to help others in emergency situations without fear of legal consequences. These laws protect a healthcare professional from liability when they voluntarily stop to provide aid in an emergency, as long as they act within the scope of their training and provide reasonable care. This protection is especially important in situations outside the hospital, such as car accidents, public emergencies, or sudden medical events in the community. However, Good Samaritan protection is not absolute. Liability is limited unless there is evidence of gross negligence or intentional misconduct. Gross negligence means care that is extremely careless or reckless, far below the standard a reasonably prudent nurse would provide. Intentional misconduct refers to behavior meant to cause harm. As long as the nurse acts in good faith, performs only the interventions they are trained to do, and does not accept payment for their help, Good Samaritan laws generally provide strong legal protection. These laws reinforce the core nursing values of compassion and service. They ensure that nurses can step in to save a life or stabilize a patient in crisis without worrying about legal repercussions. Understanding Good Samaritan laws empowers nurses to respond confidently and ethically when emergencies occur outside the clinical setting. Patients' rights are an essential part of ethical nursing practice. In 2003, the American Hospital Association revised the traditional Patient's Bill of Rights and renamed it the Patient Care Partnership, understanding expectations, rights, and responsibilities. This updated version focuses on helping patients understand what they should expect during their care, including communication, safety, respect, and participation in decision-making. It is important to note that the Patient Care Partnership is an ethical document, not a legal statute. However, its guidelines reflect best practice and support a patient-centered approach to care. The primary goal of patients' rights is to protect and preserve a patient's dignity, privacy, freedom of movement, and access to information. This means patients have the right to understand their diagnosis, treatment options, and plan of care. They also have the right to receive care in a respectful environment, to ask questions, to refuse treatment, and to expect that their health information will remain confidential. Nurses contribute to these rights by communicating clearly, safeguarding privacy, and advocating for the patient's wishes. Although the Patient Care Partnership is ethical rather than legal, state legislatures have passed laws that enforce or guarantee many specific patient rights. For example, informed consent laws, privacy protections under HIPAA, and regulations preventing abuse or unnecessary restraints all support patient autonomy and safety. As nurses, we must understand both the ethical expectations and the legal protections that guide how we care for patients. When we uphold patients' rights, we strengthen trust, improve outcomes, and demonstrate the core values of the nursing profession. The National Patient Safety Goals created by the Joint Commission are designed to improve the safety of patient care nationwide. These goals provide evidence-based and expert-based solutions to the most common and most serious patient safety risks. They focus on high-risk areas such as accurate patient identification, safe medication practices, infection prevention, fall reduction, and communication during handoff reports. Healthcare facilities are evaluated on how well they meet these goals, and nurses play a central role in putting them into practice every day. One major part of patient safety is preventing what's known as a sentinel event. A sentinel event is an unexpected occurrence involving death or serious physical or psychological injury, or the risk thereof. These events are taken extremely seriously because they indicate a breakdown in the healthcare system that could cause harm again if not addressed. After a sentinel event occurs, the facility must perform a root cause analysis to determine exactly what went wrong and how to prevent the same situation from happening again. Poor communication among caregivers is the most frequent cause of sentinel events. Breakdowns during shift change, unclear orders, missing documentation, and assumptions between team members can all lead to errors. This is why structured communication tools like SBAR and consistent handoff procedures are so important in nursing practice. By understanding the national patient safety goals and actively applying them, nurses help create a safer healthcare environment and reduce the likelihood of serious patient harm. The medical record is one of the most important legal documents in healthcare. It contains a complete chronological record of all assessments, diagnostic tests, treatments, medications, provider orders, and nursing care provided to a patient. Because it is a legal record, every entry must be accurate, objective, timely, and written according to facility policy. What you document and what you fail to document can have major legal consequences. The medical record must be kept confidential at all times. HIPAA regulations require that patient information is protected, shared only with people directly involved in the patient's care. This means that only individuals who are part of the patient's treatment team, or those who need the information for healthcare operations, have legal access to the chart. Curious coworkers, friends, students, or staff not involved with that patient are not permitted to look at the record. Accessing a chart without a legitimate reason is a serious HIPAA violation. It's important to understand that the medical record is the property of the hospital, agency, or provider, not the patient. While patients have the right to view their information and request copies, They cannot take or alter the original chart. This protects the integrity of the legal document. When nurses document correctly and maintain confidentiality, they support patient safety, legal compliance, and professional accountability. The medical record serves as the official proof of what care was provided, when it was provided, and how the patient responded, making it one of the most critical tools in healthcare. HIPAA is one of the most important federal laws affecting daily nursing practice. It establishes regulations that protect patient privacy, including how medical information can be used, stored, shared, and accessed. HIPAA applies to all forms of patient information, electronic, written, and verbal, and it ensures that healthcare workers handle protected health information, or PHI, in a secure and confidential manner. This is especially important today with widespread use of electronic medical records and digital communication. When healthcare workers fail to follow HIPAA regulations, there can be serious civil penalties. This means an individual or facility may face financial fines for breaches such as discussing patient information in public areas, accessing a chart out of curiosity, losing documents, or sharing information with someone who is not authorized. Even accidental or unintentional breaches must be reported and can result in penalties. HIPAA also distinguishes between accidental breaches and intentional violations, which carry even harsher consequences. Intentional or malicious misuse of patient information, such as accessing a celebrity's medical record, sharing information on social media, or selling patient data, can lead to large fines and even jail time. Nurses must always remember that patient information is highly protected, and even seemingly harmless actions like looking up a patient out of curiosity or talking about a case in an elevator can violate HIPAA. Following HIPAA is essential for maintaining patient trust, ensuring legal compliance, and upholding the ethical standards of the nursing profession. Every nurse has the responsibility to protect privacy and handle patient information with the highest level of professionalism. Consent is a fundamental legal and ethical requirement in healthcare. A consent form is a legal document that records the patient's permission to undergo a treatment, procedure, or surgery, or to release medical information to insurance companies or other healthcare providers. Consent ensures that patients remain in control of what happens to their bodies and their personal information. Without proper consent, performing a procedure could be considered battery, even if the patient benefits from it. Within the broader concept of consent is informed consent, which is essential for any treatment that carries risks, benefits, or alternatives the patient must consider. Informed consent means the patient is actively involved in decision-making about their care. The person signing must fully understand what the procedure involves, why it is being recommended, the potential risks and complications, available alternatives, and the expected outcomes. They must also have the mental capacity to understand the information and make a knowledgeable decision. It is important to remember that obtaining informed consent is the responsibility of the physician or provider, not the nurse. However, nurses play a critical role by confirming that the signature is authentic and voluntary, ensuring the patient was not coerced, and advocating for the patient if they express confusion or have unanswered questions. Nurses should never attempt to explain a procedure in place of a provider, and if a patient seems uncertain, the nurse must request the provider return to clarify information before the patient signs. True informed consent protects patient autonomy and reinforces trust in the healthcare relationship. A release is a legal form that removes or excuses one party from liability. In healthcare, this typically allows a facility or provider to be protected if a patient chooses to act against medical recommendations. One of the most common examples is a release for leaving against medical advice, often called a Leave AMA form. When a patient refuses treatment or decides to leave the hospital before the provider believes it is safe, the AMA form documents that the patient understands the risks, such as worsening illness, complications, or even death, and that the healthcare team is not legally responsible for negative outcomes resulting from that decision. Release forms can also refer to documents that authorize the transfer of a patient's confidential medical information to another facility or organization. This includes sending records to schools, insurance companies, other providers, or outside agencies. For these releases, the patient gives permission for specific information to be shared, and this must comply with HIPAA privacy regulations. As nurses, it's important to verify that the release form is correctly completed, signed, dated, and that only the minimum necessary information is shared to protect patient privacy. Overall, release forms help protect both the patient and the healthcare facility by ensuring that decisions and information sharing are fully documented and legally valid. Most healthcare facilities have strict policies that prevent nurses from witnessing wills or other legal documents. This is done to protect the nurse, the patient, and the facility from possible legal complications. When a nurse signs as a witness on a will, it may later imply that the nurse can speak to the patient's mental status, level of alertness, or freedom from coercion at the exact moment the document was signed, which creates significant legal vulnerability. Because of this, most agencies require that legal documents be handled by notaries, attorneys, or designated administrative staff rather than bedside nurses. If a will or another legal document becomes contested in court, the nurse could be called to testify about the patient's health, mental condition, decision-making capacity, or interactions with certain visitors during their hospitalization. Even if the nurse never intended to be involved in the legal matter, witnessing the document automatically connects them to the case. That is why avoiding involvement in legal paperwork is considered best practice. As nurses, our role is to protect the patient's health and safety, not to participate in legal decisions that may have long-term consequences. If a patient or family asks a nurse to witness a will, the nurse should politely decline and follow facility policy by contacting the appropriate personnel who can assist safely and legally. Advance directives are extremely important because they allow a person to plan ahead and communicate their medical wishes for times when they may not be able to express them. These documents protect the patient's autonomy and ensure that the care team understands what the patient wants regarding treatments such as resuscitation, ventilation, feeding tubes, or comfort-focused care. Advance directives help prevent family conflict, reduce confusion, and support ethical decision-making during medical emergencies or end-of-life situations. One of the most important types of advance directives is the durable power of attorney for healthcare. This legal document allows the patient to choose a healthcare agent, sometimes called a surrogate or proxy, who is given legal authority to make medical decisions if the patient can't speak for themselves. The patient selects someone they trust, someone who understands their values and is willing to advocate for their wishes. It is essential to remind students that the durable power of attorney is activated only when the patient is unable to make decisions, not when the patient is alert and capable. As nurses, our responsibility is to know whether a patient has advance directives on file, to ensure the documents are placed appropriately in the medical record, and to respect and follow those directives. These legal tools help maintain patient-centered, ethical, and safe care, especially during critical moments. Now we are going to go over negligence and malpractice, two of the most important legal concepts nurses must understand. Negligence means failing to act the way a reasonably prudent person would act in the same situation. This can mean failing to do something you should have done, such as notifying the provider about a critical change in a patient's condition, or doing something a careful person would not do, like leaving a bed in the high position without side rails for a confused patient. Negligence does not require professional training. It can apply to anyone. Malpractice, on the other hand, is professional negligence. This occurs when a nurse does not act according to the professional standards of care that a reasonably prudent nurse would follow. Malpractice involves specialized knowledge, skills, and judgment, so only professionals, such as nurses, physicians, or therapists, can be held liable for it. Examples include administering the wrong medication dose, failing to follow up on abnormal lab values, or not using proper sterile technique and causing an infection. Nurses are in a position of trust because we have access to sensitive information and close physical contact with patients. This increases our responsibility to act with professionalism, maintain privacy, and follow all legal and ethical guidelines. When legal boundaries are violated and a patient is harmed, litigation can occur, meaning the nurse may face a lawsuit. Understanding these definitions helps nurses protect their patients, protect themselves, and deliver safe, high-quality care. On this slide, we're reviewing two important legal terms that nurses must understand: assault and battery. These terms often appear together, but they describe two different types of wrongful actions. Assault refers to a threat to harm another person, or even a threat to touch someone without their permission. The key point is that assault does not require physical contact. It's about causing fear or creating the belief that harmful or unwanted contact is about to happen. For example, threatening to give an injection after the patient has clearly refused would be considered assault. Battery, on the other hand, involves actual physical contact that occurs without the person's consent or against their will. This includes performing a procedure or treatment that the patient refused, or touching a patient in a harmful or offensive way. Even if the nurse believes the action is beneficial, it becomes battery if the patient did not agree to it. This is why obtaining valid consent before any procedure is so important. As nurses, our role is to protect patient autonomy at all times, meaning we respect their right to make decisions about their own bodies and care. These concepts reinforce why communication, consent, and respect for patient choices are foundational to ethical nursing practice. On this slide, we're talking about defamation, which is an important legal concept for nurses because it deals with how we speak about patients, coworkers, and other professionals. Defamation occurs when one person makes false statements about someone else, and those statements cause harm to that person's reputation. The key elements are that the information must be untrue and that it causes damage such as loss of trust, professional credibility, or emotional harm. There are two forms of defamation. Slander refers to statements that are spoken. This includes gossiping about a coworker or repeating unverified accusations about a patient. Libel refers to written statements, including what is written in charts, emails, text messages, or even social media posts. In nursing, inaccurate or biased documentation can cross into libel if it reflects personal judgment instead of objective facts. This is why we always chart objectively, using observable, measurable information rather than personal opinions or assumptions. As LPNs, protecting confidentiality and maintaining professional communication is part of ethical and legal practice. Even casual conversations can become slander if they involve spreading untrue information. This is why it's vital to avoid workplace gossip and to keep communication factual, respectful, and appropriate. On this slide, we're discussing invasion of privacy, which is a serious violation of both ethical and legal standards in nursing. Invasion of privacy occurs when the confidential and privileged nature of the nurse-patient relationship is broken, and information that should remain private becomes known to people who have no right to access it. This can happen intentionally or accidentally, but either way it can harm the patient. Unauthorized disclosure might involve sharing a patient's diagnosis, treatment, or personal history with someone who is not involved in their care. This includes talking about patients in hallways, elevators, restaurants, or on social media, even if names aren't mentioned. HIPAA regulations make it clear that any information that could identify a patient must be protected at all times. When privacy is violated, patients may feel embarrassed, exposed, or lose trust in the healthcare team. It can affect their dignity and even their willingness to seek care in the future. As nurses, we protect patient privacy by maintaining confidentiality, speaking only with those directly involved in care, keeping records secure, and being mindful of our surroundings when discussing sensitive health information. Respecting privacy is both a legal duty and an essential part of compassionate, ethical nursing practice. On this slide, we're learning about false imprisonment, which is a legal term that refers to restricting a person's freedom of movement without lawful justification. In the healthcare setting, this can occur when a patient is prevented from leaving a facility, or when their movement is restricted in a way that they did not consent to. Examples may include blocking a patient's exit, using restraints without proper orders, or telling a patient they are not allowed to leave when they actually have the right to do so. It's important to understand that patients who are competent have the legal right to refuse treatment and to leave the facility against medical advice. Stopping them from leaving, unless there is a specific legal reason, can be considered false imprisonment. There are situations, however, when temporarily detaining a patient is allowed by law. When a patient is at risk of harming themselves or others, or when a mental health emergency meets criteria for involuntary admission, the patient may be held for a short period for safety. This requires following state laws and facility procedures, including obtaining the proper evaluations and documentation. Nurses must always know their facility policy, ensure that restraints or detentions are legally justified, and advocate for the patient's rights while maintaining safety. False imprisonment highlights an important balance in nursing practice. We must protect patient autonomy while also maintaining patient and public safety. On this slide, we're reviewing incident or occurrence reports, which are important tools in healthcare for improving safety and preventing future problems. An incident report is completed whenever something happens that is out of the ordinary. For example, a patient fall, a medication error, a needle stick injury, or an unexpected event that could potentially harm a patient, visitor, or staff member. The purpose of the report is to document exactly what happened, including the facts only. No opinions, no blame, and no assumptions. You will record who was involved, who witnessed the event, and the circumstances surrounding it. The focus is always on accuracy, clarity, and objectivity because these reports are used for quality improvement, risk management, and legal protection for both the patient and the staff. It's important to emphasize that incident reports are not part of the patient's medical record and they should never be mentioned in the chart. Your documentation in the medical record should describe the patient's condition, your assessments, and any nursing interventions performed, but it should not reference that an incident report was completed. This helps protect the confidentiality of internal facility processes and keeps the focus on patient care. Incident reports play a vital role in creating a culture of safety by helping the healthcare team identify system issues and prevent similar incidents in the future. This slide explains why malpractice insurance is an important form of professional protection for nurses. Malpractice insurance helps protect your livelihood, your career, and your personal assets if you are ever named in a lawsuit. Even if you did nothing wrong, anyone involved in a patient's care can be included in legal action, and the costs of defending yourself can be extremely high. Malpractice insurance provides coverage for legal representation, meaning the policy pays for a lawyer to defend you. It may also cover any financial awards the court orders the nurse to pay, up to the limits of the policy. Without this insurance, these costs could fall entirely on the nurse, which could create devastating financial hardship. Another important feature is that malpractice insurance may help cover legal costs if a nurse becomes the subject of a state board of nursing investigation. These investigations can occur for many reasons, sometimes unrelated to a lawsuit, such as complaints from a patient, coworker, or employer. Having coverage ensures that the nurse has legal support during the process, which can be lengthy and complex. It's important for nurses to understand whether they are covered only by employer-provided insurance or whether they need individual coverage. Personal malpractice insurance often offers broader protection and follows the nurse regardless of where they work. On this slide, we're focusing on ethics in nursing, which are the moral principles and standards that guide our behavior as professionals. Ethics are not laws, but rather rules of conduct that a particular professional group, such as nurses, agrees are the morally right or proper way to act. These principles form the foundation of trust between the nurse and the patient. Ethics differ from laws because ethical behavior is voluntary, while laws are mandatory. A nurse can legally do something but still feel that it isn't ethically right. For example, a patient may refuse treatment, and although it might feel emotionally difficult for the nurse, ethically we respect the patient's autonomy. Many healthcare organizations have ethics committees, which are made up of professionals from different departments: nursing, medicine, social work, chaplaincy, and administration. These committees help when difficult decisions arise, such as end-of-life care, withdrawal of treatment, or disagreements among family members. They help the care team explore the ethical dilemma from multiple viewpoints and develop policies that support ethical, patient-centered care. Ethics committees also guide facilities in creating standards that help nurses navigate challenging situations, ensuring that decisions are consistent, well-reasoned, and aligned with the values of the facility and the nursing profession. Their goal is to support both the patient and the healthcare team in making thoughtful, morally grounded decisions. Answer C. Pre-3. Rationale. Standards of care define actions that are permitted or prohibited in most nursing interventions. These standards are accepted as legal guidelines for appropriateness of performance. Answer 1. Rationale. A member of the nursing profession must report behavior that does not meet established standards. Answer 1. Rationale. Defamation is when one person makes remarks about another person that are untrue, and those remarks damage that person's reputation. The fourth element of malpractice is injury or damages. Answer 3. Rationale. Nurses are required in most states to report information regarding child or elder abuse or violent acts that may be crimes to the appropriate agencies, but not to other family members. Sharing information with other family members is a violation of the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA.